She boasted, "Men line up for me." I replied, "Enjoy the queue," then married the one who skipped it. Her accidental run-in at our vow renewal? Security escorted. I thought I'd seen the last of Kimberly 2 years ago when our relationship imploded in spectacular fashion, but apparently, she had other plans. As a software engineer, I spend my days solving logical problems with clear solutions, so discovering that my ex-girlfriend had been systematically commenting on every single one of my social media posts felt like finding malware in a supposedly clean system. I first noticed the pattern during a quiet evening at home, scrolling through my LinkedIn notifications while my girlfriend Sienna graded papers at the kitchen table. There it was again, another comment from Kimberly on a post about my recent promotion to senior developer. Congrats! Remember when we used to dream about success like this together? Life takes such interesting turns. My current dating situation is absolutely amazing, multiple suitors keeping things exciting. I showed Sienna the screen, watching her eyebrows raise as she read the bizarre mix of congratulations and oversharing. She's been doing this for months, I explained, scrolling back through my posts to show the consistent pattern. Every professional achievement, every casual photo, every milestone had Kimberly's commentary attached like some kind of digital barnacle. The comments always followed the same formula: acknowledge the post, reference our shared past, then pivot to bragging about her apparently thriving love life. When I posted about completing my AWS certification, she wrote about how proud she was and how her 3 current dating prospects were all impressed by ambitious men. When I shared a photo from a hiking trip, she reminisced about our old adventures while mentioning her weekend plans with someone special. The most unsettling discovery came when I checked my LinkedIn connections and realized she'd been systematically reaching out to our mutual friends, asking seemingly casual questions about my relationship status. My college roommate mentioned she'd contacted him through Facebook, claiming she wanted to catch up, but spending most of the conversation asking whether I was seeing anyone seriously. She even asked if you were happy, he told me, over drinks. Like she was conducting some kind of wellness survey. The final straw came last week when I posted a simple photo of the engagement ring I'd chosen for Sienna, nothing dramatic, just a picture of the princess-cut solitaire with the caption, "She said yes." Within 30 minutes, Kimberly had not only liked the post but left a comment that made my stomach turn. "Congratulations to both of you. So exciting to see people finding their person. I'm genuinely happy for you, even though some people settle while others have endless options. Wishing you both the best." I screenshot the comment immediately, knowing that tone. The same passive-aggressive sweetness she'd perfected during our relationship, the kind that left you questioning whether you were being insulted or complimented. When I showed it to Sienna that evening, she just shook her head and suggested we block Kimberly completely. "Life's too short to deal with people who can't let go," she said, deleting the comment and adjusting my privacy settings. But something told me this wouldn't be the end of it. I was right to be suspicious because Kimberly's behavior escalated dramatically once she discovered our wedding venue, and I learned just how resourceful desperation could make someone. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks after we booked Riverside Gardens, when their event coordinator called me with an unusual concern. "Mr. Patterson, I hope you don't mind me asking, but do you know someone named Kimberly who might have strong opinions about our venue?" Sarah, the coordinator, sounded genuinely puzzled. "She's left several detailed reviews on our Google page, and while they're not exactly negative, they're strange." I felt my stomach drop as Sarah read me the reviews over the phone. Beautiful venue, though I noticed some issues with their attention to detail during my extensive research. Currently planning my own much more elaborate wedding here and want future couples to be aware of potential concerns. Service seems adequate for simpler celebrations. Each review was carefully crafted to sound legitimate while subtly undermining confidence in the venue, and they were all posted by someone who had never actually booked their services. "She's calling herself a potential client and asking very specific questions about your event," Sarah continued. "Wanting to know about your menu choices, your timeline, even asking about your guest count. We don't typically share those details, but she's been quite persistent." The reviews were just the beginning. Within days, Kimberly had somehow tracked down Sienna's Instagram account and begun leaving comments that made my skin crawl with their calculated sweetness. On a photo of Sienna's engagement ring, she wrote, "So classic and understated. I love how some people embrace the simple style, it's very authentic." On a picture of Sienna in her scrubs at the veterinary clinic, "You have such a practical approach to life." Daniel always appreciated the no-nonsense type. When Sienna finally blocked her after a particularly backhanded comment about her refreshingly modest wedding dress shopping photos, I thought the harassment would stop. Instead, Kimberly created fake accounts with variations of her name and continued monitoring our wedding preparations like some kind of deranged social media detective. The fake profiles had no photos, minimal followers, but they were all following both of our accounts and systematically liking old photos, a clear sign someone was deep diving through our entire history. The situation reached a new level of absurd when our florist called, confused about a woman claiming to be Sienna's wedding coordinator, who had phoned asking detailed questions about our arrangements. She wanted to know everything, Maria explained. The exact flowers, the color scheme, even asked about the bouquet toss timeline. Said she was coordinating with other vendors, but something felt off. I realized Kimberly was systematically contacting our vendors, gathering intelligence about our wedding day like she was planning some kind of military operation. Our DJ received similar calls, as did our photographer, each reporting conversations with a woman who claimed to be working on our behalf but asked questions that had nothing to do with actual coordination. "She seemed to know an awful lot about your relationship history," our photographer mentioned. "Kept mentioning college memories and asking if I'd be capturing any meaningful moments from your past." The final piece of evidence came when Sienna's maid of honor received a friend request from someone using Sienna's middle name as a first name. The profile had stolen photos from Sienna's old Facebook pictures and was attempting to connect with our wedding party, clearly fishing for more detailed information about our plans. I realized we weren't just dealing with someone who couldn't let go, we were dealing with someone who had turned stalking into a full-time hobby. Our wedding day at Riverside Gardens should have been perfect, but Kimberly had apparently decided to make it her personal audition for the role of uninvited guest of the year. I was adjusting my tie in the bridal suite when Ashley, our wedding coordinator, knocked on the door with an expression that immediately put me on alert. "Daniel, we have a situation," she said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "There's someone here who claims she knows you, and she's making quite an impression on your guests." My blood ran cold as Ashley described a woman in a white cocktail dress who had somehow obtained an invitation and was currently holding court during the cocktail hour, regaling anyone who would listen with stories about her history with the groom. I didn't need to ask who it was. Only Kimberly would have the audacity to wear white to someone else's wedding while positioning herself as the main character of someone else's story. I found her near the bar, surrounded by a small group of my confused relatives, gesticulating dramatically with a champagne flute while wearing a dress that was clearly designed to upstage the bride. "So Daniel and I met in college," she was saying to my elderly Aunt Margaret, "and honestly, we had this incredible connection that everyone could see. People used to say we were soulmates, you know? It's just fascinating how life works out differently than you expect." Aunt Margaret looked deeply uncomfortable, glancing around for an escape route while Kimberly continued her monologue. "Of course, I'm genuinely happy for him," she continued, "but I sometimes wonder what would have happened if we'd made different choices. I mean, we really understood each other on this deep level that's so rare to find." I approached the group with what I hoped was a calm expression, though my hands were clenched into fists at my sides. "Kimberly," I said, interrupting her mid-sentence, "what are you doing here?" She turned toward me with a brilliant smile that didn't reach her eyes, clearly prepared for this moment. "Daniel, congratulations, honey. I wouldn't miss this for the world. We have so much history together, I had to be here to see you start this new chapter." The emphasis on history made my skin crawl, especially with my family members standing right there absorbing every word. "How did you get an invitation?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the rage building in my chest. "Oh, I have my ways," she said with a laugh that sounded like broken glass. "Plus, I figured since I'm such an important part of your story, you'd want me here for the big day. I was just telling your aunt about our college romance and how special our connection was." Aunt Margaret seized the opportunity to escape, muttering something about needing to find her seat, leaving me alone with Kimberly and her delusional narrative. "You need to leave," I said quietly, aware that other guests were starting to notice the tension. "This is my wedding day, and you weren't invited." Her face shifted from fake sweetness to something harder, more desperate. "Come on, Daniel. Don't be like that. I just want to celebrate with you. Maybe even say a few words during the reception, share some memories from the good times." The idea of Kimberly giving a toast at my wedding made my stomach turn. "Absolutely not. You need to leave right now, or I'm calling security." That's when she completely lost whatever composure she'd been maintaining. "Security?" she said, her voice rising above the ambient conversation. "I was personally invited to this wedding. I have every right to be here. You can't just erase our history, Daniel." Other guests were definitely staring now, some pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a spectacle. Ashley appeared at my elbow with 2 security guards, clearly having anticipated this escalation. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us," one of the guards said firmly, while Kimberly clutched her champagne glass like a weapon. "This is ridiculous," she shouted as the guards flanked her. "He's making the biggest mistake of his life. She stole my life. This should be me up there. Daniel, you know we belong together." As security escorted her toward the exit, she continued her meltdown for everyone to hear, alternating between professing her love and insulting Sienna, creating exactly the kind of drama she'd probably been fantasizing about for months. The last thing I heard before the doors closed was her screaming about how I'd downgraded and how our real love would survive this temporary setback. I stood there for a moment, watching the guests slowly return to their conversations, most looking embarrassed on my behalf while others seemed genuinely entertained by the free show. Ashley touched my arm gently. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Your bride doesn't need to know about this right now." I nodded, grateful for her discretion, and tried to refocus on the fact that in 30 minutes, I'd be marrying the woman who actually belonged in my life. Our honeymoon in Charleston should have been the perfect escape from Kimberly's wedding day drama, but I quickly learned that restraining orders apparently don't apply to public spaces and tourist attractions. The first sign that our romantic getaway had been compromised came on day 2, when Sienna and I were walking through the historic French Quarter and she suddenly grabbed my arm. "Daniel," she whispered, nodding toward a woman taking selfies near a fountain about 50 feet away, "isn't that your crazy ex?" I followed her gaze and felt my blood pressure spike as I recognized Kimberly's distinctive blonde hair and the dramatic poses she struck for her phone camera, clearly positioning herself to be in the background of other couples' romantic photos. "There's no way this is a coincidence," I muttered, pulling Sienna in the opposite direction while trying to process how Kimberly had discovered our honeymoon destination. We'd been careful not to post anything on social media until after we arrived, but somehow she tracked us down like some kind of demented private investigator. The harassment escalated throughout the week as we realized Kimberly was systematically following our Instagram stories and showing up at every location we posted about, transforming our romantic honeymoon into a bizarre game of cat and mouse. When we posted a photo from brunch at the famous Magnolia Cafe, she appeared in our peripheral vision 20 minutes later, ordering loudly at the counter while making sure we could hear her commentary about divine coincidences and fate bringing people together. At the historic Boone Hall plantation, she somehow managed to photobomb our couple's photos by positioning herself strategically in the background, always wearing eye-catching outfits that would be impossible to crop out later. "She's deliberately ruining our pictures," Sienna said, scrolling through the photos on my camera that evening. "Look at this one. She's literally posing behind us like she's part of our romantic photo shoot." The most unsettling incident happened during our carriage tour through the historic district, when our guide pointed out a woman who'd been following the route on foot, taking photos of our carriage from various angles. "That young lady's been trailing us for the past 20 minutes, the elderly guide mentioned with obvious concern. "Should I contact the authorities?" I turned to look and sure enough, there was Kimberly Power walking alongside our romantic carriage ride, documenting our honeymoon like she was working for the paparazzi. Her behavior reached a new level of invasive when we returned to our boutique hotel each evening to find evidence that she was staying somewhere nearby. The concierge mentioned a woman who'd been asking detailed questions about our room service orders and whether we had any special romantic plans. She claimed to be your wedding coordinator following up on honeymoon arrangements, he explained apologetically. Said she was ensuring everything met your expectations, but her questions seemed rather personal. The situation became genuinely frightening when hotel security approached us in the lobby on our fourth night. "Mr. Patterson, we've had someone attempt to upgrade their room to your floor," the security manager explained quietly. She claimed there was a romantic reunion planned and insisted she needed to be close to room 412. When we told her that was impossible, she became quite agitated and mentioned something about destiny and soulmates. I realized Kimberly had somehow discovered not just our hotel, but our exact room number, transforming what should have been our most intimate getaway into a surveillance nightmare. The final straw came on our last morning when room service arrived with a bouquet of red roses that neither of us had ordered. The attached card read, "Congratulations on your starter marriage. Real love always finds a way back. XOXO." I called the front desk immediately, my hands shaking with rage as I read the message aloud. "Sir, those flowers were ordered by a woman who claimed to be surprising her best friend," the desk clerk explained. "She paid in cash and specifically requested they be delivered to your room. Should we contact the authorities?" As I stared at those roses, the same type Kimberly had always preferred during our relationship, I realized we weren't dealing with someone who would simply move on after being rejected. We were dealing with someone who genuinely believed she could manipulate reality through sheer persistence and delusion. "Yes," I told the clerk, "please contact the authorities. And when we get home, I'm calling a lawyer." Sienna took my hand as I hung up the phone, her face pale but determined. "This has to stop," she said quietly. "She's not going to give up until someone makes her." Looking at those roses, I knew she was absolutely right. Back home in Phoenix, I discovered that documenting Kimberly's escalating harassment had created a paper trail that would make any prosecutor happy, and I finally understood why people talk about stalking as a serious crime rather than just annoying behavior. Sienna and I spent our first week back from the honeymoon compiling months of evidence with the methodical precision I normally reserved for debugging code, screenshots of fake social media accounts, recordings of vendor harassment, witness statements from our wedding coordinator and hotel security, even the threatening note that came with those roses. Our attorney Marcus Reynolds took one look at the comprehensive file I'd prepared and whistled low under his breath. "This isn't just harassment," he said, spreading the documents across his conference table like evidence in a criminal case. "This is textbook stalking with clear escalation patterns. The fake accounts, the vendor impersonation, the venue infiltration, she's been systematically invading your privacy and attempting to control your lives." I felt a strange sense of validation hearing the legal terminology applied to what I'd been experiencing, transforming Kimberly's behavior from annoying ex-girlfriend to criminal stalker in my mind. Marcus explained that we had grounds for both a restraining order and potential criminal charges, depending on how aggressively we wanted to pursue the matter. "The venue infiltration alone constitutes criminal trespass," he continued, "and the fake coordinator calls could be considered identity fraud. But the honeymoon surveillance really seals the case. That shows premeditation and interstate harassment." The court hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later, giving us time to gather additional evidence and prepare our testimony. What I wasn't prepared for was how much more evidence would surface once we started looking seriously. My college roommate came forward with screenshots of messages where Kimberly had tried to get information about our relationship timeline. Our wedding photographer produced recordings of the fake coordinator calls where Kimberly had asked increasingly invasive questions about our meaningful moments. Even more disturbing was what Marcus discovered through his investigator. Kimberly had been maintaining detailed records of our activities in what could only be described as a stalker journal. The private investigator she hired provided copies of her notes as part of his cooperation agreement, Marcus explained during our preparation meeting. "She's been documenting your schedules, favorite restaurants, even Sienna's work patterns at the veterinary clinic. This shows a level of obsession that goes way beyond normal breakup behavior." The journal entries made my skin crawl with their casual tone discussing our private lives. She'd noted the times I left for work, the coffee shop where Sienna met friends, even speculation about our weekend plans based on social media activity. One entry simply read, "Daniel posted gym photo at 7 am, must be new routine since marriage. Need to find out which location." The actual hearing felt surreal, watching Kimberly sit across the courtroom in a conservative outfit that was clearly chosen to project innocence and stability. She'd brought her own lawyer, a tired-looking public defender who seemed to be hearing the full extent of his client's behavior for the first time as Marcus presented our evidence. Judge Patricia Williams reviewed our documentation with the kind of thorough attention that made me grateful I'd been so meticulous in my record-keeping. "Ms. Thompson," she said, addressing Kimberly directly, "do you understand the seriousness of these allegations? This court has documented evidence of systematic harassment spanning multiple states and several months." Kimberly's response was exactly what I'd expected, a rambling explanation about misunderstandings and coincidences that made her sound even more delusional than I'd remembered. "Your Honor, Daniel and I have a special connection that transcends normal relationships," she said, seemingly oblivious to how insane she sounded. "I was just trying to be supportive during his major life transitions. Everything I did came from a place of love and genuine concern for his happiness." Judge Williams was clearly unimpressed by this defense. "Ms. Thompson, creating fake social media accounts, impersonating wedding coordinators, and following someone on their honeymoon does not constitute support. It constitutes stalking, and this court takes such behavior very seriously." The comprehensive restraining order she granted exceeded even Marcus's expectations. Kimberly was prohibited from any direct or indirect contact with either of us, couldn't come within 500 feet of our home or workplaces, and was specifically banned from attending any events where we might be present. Violation of any provision would result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. Furthermore, Judge Williams continued, "I'm ordering mandatory psychological evaluation and counseling. Ms. Thompson, you clearly need professional help to understand appropriate boundaries in relationships." As we left the courthouse, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying, knowing that Kimberly's obsession was now officially recognized as the criminal behavior it had always been. 1 year later, Sienna and I decided to plan an intimate vow renewal ceremony at Mountain View Lodge to celebrate not just our first anniversary, but surviving the chaos that had threatened to overshadow our beginning. I'd been promoted to lead developer with a substantial raise, Sienna had opened her own veterinary practice, and we'd finally felt secure enough to start planning for the future without constantly looking over our shoulders for Kimberly's next appearance. The vow renewal was meant to be our fresh start, a private ceremony with just immediate family and our closest friends, carefully planned to avoid any possibility of unwanted guests or dramatic interruptions. We'd learned from experience to keep our plans offline and share details only with people we completely trusted. The Mountain View Lodge was perfect for our vision of an intimate gathering, with its secluded outdoor pavilion overlooking the valley and a strict guest list policy that made crashers virtually impossible. I was standing at the altar, watching Sienna walk down the aisle in a simple but stunning dress, feeling genuinely peaceful for the first time in months when her expression suddenly changed from radiant happiness to confused alarm. She stumbled slightly in her approach, her eyes fixed on something behind me near the catering area. "Daniel," she whispered as she reached my side, "don't turn around, but there's someone in a red dress by the food station who looks exactly like your ex." My blood ran cold as I realized that even our most carefully planned private moment wasn't safe from Kimberly's obsessive need to insert herself into our lives. I maintained my composure through sheer force of will, keeping my eyes on the officiant while my mind raced through the implications of her presence. How had she discovered this event? We'd been so careful, so deliberate about privacy. As the ceremony continued, I caught glimpses of the woman in red moving carefully around the periphery of our gathering, staying just far enough away to avoid immediate detection but close enough to document everything with what appeared to be professional camera equipment. She'd somehow managed to blend in with the catering staff, wearing a red dress that could pass for a uniform if you didn't look too closely, and carrying herself with the confident air of someone who belonged there. "Do you, Daniel, take Sienna to be your wife, to have and to hold through all of life's challenges?" the officiant asked, and I realized the irony of promising to face life's challenges while one of our biggest challenges was literally photographing us from behind a decorative pillar. I do, I said firmly, making the commitment despite the surreal circumstances, while Sienna squeezed my hand in a gesture that said she understood we were in this together, crazy ex-girlfriend and all. The moment came to an abrupt halt when Mountain View's security coordinator approached the woman in red, clearly having noticed that she wasn't part of their approved catering team. I watched from the corner of my eye as what appeared to be a polite conversation quickly escalated into something more confrontational. The woman was gesticulating with increasing desperation, pulling out what looked like business cards and documents, trying to prove her legitimacy to increasingly skeptical security personnel. "Ladies and gentlemen," our officiant said with remarkable composure, "let's take a brief pause in our ceremony while venue security handles a small matter." I finally turned to get a full view of the situation and confirmed what I'd already suspected. Kimberly had somehow infiltrated our vow renewal by posing as a wedding photographer's assistant. She was surrounded by 3 security guards, holding professional camera equipment and maintaining an elaborate charade about being hired for the event. Her red dress was clearly chosen to mimic the venue's signature colors, and she'd even created fake business cards identifying herself as part of a photography team. "This is completely ridiculous," I could hear her saying to the guards. "I was specifically hired for this event. Check with the bride, she'll confirm that I'm supposed to be here documenting their special day." The real photographer, a mild-mannered man named Robert whom we'd worked with extensively during planning, chose that moment to arrive fashionably late, completely undermining Kimberly's cover story. "Excuse me," he said politely to the security team, "I'm Robert Chin, the photographer for this event. Is there some kind of problem?" The look on Kimberly's face when she realized her elaborate plan was crumbling was almost worth the stress of having our vow renewal interrupted by criminal stalking behavior. The police arrived within minutes of being called, and I watched with grim satisfaction as Kimberly's restraining order violation transformed from elaborate wedding crasher scheme into serious criminal matter with real consequences. Officer Rodriguez took one look at the fake business cards, the professional camera equipment, and Kimberly's increasingly desperate explanations before calling for backup and checking her identification against their database. "Ma'am, you're currently under a restraining order that prohibits you from attending any events where Mr. and Mrs. Patterson might be present," he said with professional calm. "You're also trespassing on private property and impersonating a vendor. I need you to put your hands behind your back." That's when Kimberly completely broke down, abandoning any pretense of dignified deception and revealing the full extent of her obsessive delusion. "You don't understand," she sobbed as the handcuffs clicked into place. "Daniel and I are meant to be together. This whole marriage is just a phase he's going through. I've been waiting for him to realize his mistake." The words poured out in a torrent of confession that made our family and friends exchange uncomfortable glances. "I hired a private investigator to track his schedule. I know he goes to the gym on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I know Sienna works late on Fridays. I've been documenting everything because when he finally comes to his senses, we'll need to rebuild our relationship properly." Officer Rodriguez was taking notes while his partner called for a detective, clearly recognizing that this was far more serious than simple trespassing. "Ma'am, you're admitting to stalking behavior that violates multiple court orders. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it." But Kimberly wasn't finished with her meltdown. "I've been living in my car for 3 weeks, parked outside their neighborhood, waiting for the right moment to approach him," she continued, seemingly oblivious to the fact that every word was making her legal situation worse. "I followed them to the grocery store last Sunday, but there were too many people around. I needed to wait for a private moment like this to make him understand that we belong together." I felt Sienna's hand tighten in mine as we realized the true scope of what we'd been dealing with, not just random harassment, but systematic surveillance that had been going on for weeks without our knowledge. Our quiet anniversary celebration had revealed that Kimberly had been escalating her stalking behavior far beyond what even the restraining order had anticipated. The detective who arrived to take Kimberly's statement looked as disturbed as I felt when she continued confessing to months of illegal surveillance. She detailed how she'd been tracking our social media activity, following us to restaurants, even attempting to befriend Sienna's veterinary assistants to gather information about her work schedule. Your Honor, Marcus said during the emergency hearing 3 days later, my clients have been living under siege from someone who has clearly lost touch with reality. The defendant has admitted to sustained stalking behavior that violates every provision of the original restraining order. Judge Williams sentenced Kimberly to 6 months in jail for stalking and restraining order violations, followed by mandatory psychological evaluation and 5 years of supervised probation. More importantly, she extended our restraining order for 5 additional years and added provisions that prohibited Kimberly from hiring investigators or using any third parties to gather information about our lives. Ms. Thompson, the judge said with obvious exasperation, you will have no contact with these people directly or indirectly for the next 5 years. If you so much as Google their names, you'll be back in this courtroom facing additional charges. 6 months later, Marcus called with news that felt too good to be true. Kimberly had been released from jail and had immediately moved across the country to start fresh in a court-supervised relocation program. She's engaged to someone she met in group therapy, he reported with obvious amusement. Apparently, her counselor helped her realize that her obsession with you was preventing her from forming healthy relationships. The guy she's marrying seems to understand her history and is willing to help her maintain appropriate boundaries. I felt a strange mix of relief and genuine hope for her future when I heard this news. Not because I forgave the years of harassment, but because it meant Sienna and I could finally move forward without constantly wondering when the next incident would occur. Our second anniversary passed peacefully at a private dinner where the only photographer was Sienna's sister, and the only surprise was the dessert the restaurant brought out with a sparkler. For the first time since our relationship began, we were truly free to build our future without looking over our shoulders, and that freedom felt like the greatest gift we could have given ourselves.